and welcome to our Paving the Way Alumni Panel as a part of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. My name is Huey Xiao. I'm the Associate Director in the Office of Multicultural Affairs. Really excited to be here with our esteemed moderator and alumni, and also Jane Hong coming in from Skype. In fact, Jane, can you hear me? I have to text her. Is she muted? She's so still.
Is she in the audio or video?
Video. So I'll work on that as we do introductions and stuff. I really don't have much to say except thank you all to the sponsors for tonight's event, including Professor Ma, the Asian American Studies Program, Asian Students in America, the Brothers of Lambda Phi Epsilon, as well as co-curricular fee funding, which is very generous to support. And my office, Multicultural Affairs, and our director, Dr. Kurajiman. But last but not least, I want to thank the Office of Program Development. And here we have the Assistant Vice President of the Office of Program Development, Rachel Vassell.
Everybody, good evening. I just wanted to say briefly that it's a pleasure to be here. Our office works very closely with the Office of Multicultural Affairs. We are the Alumni Engagement Office for Diverse Alumni, and we have as our desire going forward to do more with the Asian community, making sure that as we do with African American and Latino alumni, that we build opportunities for connections between Asian alumni and Asian students on campus for learning and networking and just getting to know one another. One of our largest events is our triannual reunion on campus called Coming Back Together. It's in the fall. And again, its focus is African American and Latino, but we really hope to build some targeted events as well for other groups, including AAPI. So it's really wonderful to be here and for our office to be a part of this event. So with that being said, if you have any ideas about what we could do to further engage and connect with alumni, we'd love to hear them. So feel free to grab me after the panel with any thoughts that you may have. And have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Work on getting Jane in. I'll pass this over to Professor Ma, who will start the panel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Huey, for inviting me to be the moderator for the panel. Let me very briefly introduce myself. I'm currently a professor of sociology and also directing the Asian American Studies minor program. This is my second year of directing the program, so I just hand out some very limited business cards I've had, and I hope that if you're interested in the program, I'm more than happy to meet with any one of you, have conversations, and drop by to my office, and let's talk about your interest.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Hi, Jane. Can you hear me now?
Did someone adjust the... Did you mute it? Oh yeah, you muted it, okay. Thank you.
Does that mean I have to say it again?
Can you hear now?
Hi, Jane. Can you hear me now?
No?
No. Did you know?
Let's all wait till they're... She's got a thing. Should be fine.
I didn't call her again.
Maybe she has her mute on. She might have her mute on, because we just tested it.
Do you want me to just call her again?
Sure. Bye, Jane. Bye-bye. Get it away first.
I got it.
Hello.
Hello.
Wait, there's a computer or mic?
Keep on talking.
Hi, Jane.
Can you all talk and just see if she hears me?
Hey, Jane, can you hear us?
Hello, hello. Jane.
This is up.
Huh, it was working before.
No, it's like up here. Yeah.
But we can hear her,
Yeah, we
right?
can hear her, so keep on going. And what we will try to do, maybe I can put her on my speaker on my phone. And then she can hear. So let's search.
You want to put your speakerphone here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can text her the questions as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm loud. Y'all hear me?
Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, continue.
Okay.
I'll work on this.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Well, that's it for my self-introduction. And very briefly, I would welcome you to come and talk to me about the program. Okay. All right. So I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. I'm so glad they're able to make their way back to Syracuse, and welcome back again. And actually, I personally taught some of you, I guess, at least Ben. And so sitting to my next is Victoria Chan, and Ben Fang is the gentleman and on the panel, and then Sharon Lee. And I think you all have access to their bios, and I'd like to give time and opportunity for them to introduce themselves, especially things that probably is beyond the written text that you can all see. Please, Victoria, please first.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I actually got married 2 Sundays ago. Thank you so much. I'm very proud to share that my new last name is going to be Chan-Frazier. My husband, it's so weird to call him a husband. He's back in Georgia right now. He's faculty at a university, and he's busy grading, but he really wanted to come to Syracuse to hang out. If you look at my bio, it makes me sound a lot cooler than I actually am. We're getting feedback. Am I mic'd for the purpose of the video?
Huh?
Am I mic'd for the purpose of the video?
It's for her to
No, it's for
Yeah,
her to
really
hear.
it is, but actually it doesn't work, so maybe we don't need it, or maybe we do.
Turn it off. Okay. I'm gonna turn it off. Is that okay? I'm actually gonna stand up because I can't see halfway.
Oh.
Okay, I'm muted. I'm good. Anyway, it is a pleasure to be back here. I have not been on campus in 3 years, and I don't know if you can tell by my shirt how excited I am. I graduated in 2009, political science, African American studies, and I'll be honest with you, I did African American studies because there was no Asian American studies. And so when I found out that there was a literature class, I took that, and now that there is a minor, that is major. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. A lot of stuff in my bio, but I think for me, like, it is such a big honor. It is a big honor to return home. It is an honor to be able to give back to my undergraduate institution. I currently work at a college, a university in Atlanta, Georgia, so it's just wonderful to be here. I think another thing that makes it special for me is that Lambda Phi Epsilon has worked really hard when putting this together, along with a lot of different partners, and I have the pleasure of serving on their national board, which is really cool, and also my sorority sisters are here, so it's just going to be a fun day, and it's going to be a fun weekend, so I am happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yes,
All right. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben. I graduated 2015. I studied newspaper and online journalism, political science, and with a minor of Asian American Studies once it was available.
Good stuff.
Yeah. When I was here, I was involved in a lot of Asian interest organizations on campus. I was part of A-Line magazine, if you guys are familiar with that. I was the editor-in-chief my sophomore year, and then managing editor the next 2 years. And then I was also really involved with Asia. I started off as a member. That's actually how I got involved in a lot of these activities. And eventually, I ended up being president my senior year. And then I was also involved with the Asian American Studies program. doing some outreach for students. And then also I was involved with the committee for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I was in, I was in your seats like 2 years ago, looking at the speakers and hearing their experiences. So it's a little different for me to be speaking here, but I'm excited. And right now I'm a reporter for a weekly newspaper in Queens, in New York City. So I cover all sorts of things: politics, education, a little bit of sports. The full spectrum of things that occur in New York City, which is never boring, never tiring. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Sharon, please. Sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, cool. So my name is Sharon. I first want to say excuse me if I'm a little jittery because I haven't done this public speaking thing in a long time. And usually I'm on the other side of it where we were planning to bring back the alumni and I'm not the one that's up here. So thank you, Huey and the committee and OMA and Kokoroko for having us back. It's truly an honor. So I graduated here from Syracuse from my undergrad studies from the I School in 2014 with a major in information management technology. I decided to stay an extra year to do my graduate studies, also in the I School. Like Ben, I was heavily involved with a lot of Asian interest organizations on campus, primarily because when I first came onto campus, I was very interested in exploring my identity. I think that was a huge piece of understanding who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. And it was actually through the AAA 101 class I had met the Fang brothers, Ben and Vince, that's in the audience. And from the conversations that I had with Asia members and with Ben, that's kind of where I grew my interest in getting more involved with Asia, HKCO, now HKSA, AAPI Month, and the AAA minor. So. Oh, sorry.
Hi. Hi, my name is Jane. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person, but I think we're making this work the best way that we can. So to give you some background as to who I am, where I come from. So I graduated from Syracuse last year in May, and I was born and raised in the Bay Area in California, which, if you don't know, is one of the most diverse regions in the United States. So it really wasn't until I got to Syracuse that my world was kind of shook, because I was so used to being in a really diverse and inclusive community, and for the first time I had people questioning where I was really from and why my English was so perfect, and these were all questions that I never really dealt with growing up. So it was definitely a culture shock for me, but I think it also ignited this really deep passion and this almost necessary outrage in me to just open up my eyes to all of the injustices, not just Asian Americans face on a daily basis, but communities of all different identities. So I'm really excited to be a part of this event. I've been a part of different organizations on campus that have also participated, and I'm so glad that you guys could spend your Friday night to listen to us alumni, and I'm excited for tonight.
Thank you, everyone. I don't really think this works either. So I'm gonna just speak with my voice. Excuse me for my voice. I think I used to sound better than this. I had a cold this past week. Well, I'd like to start with this general question of, now everyone on the panel has been out of Syracuse University. So you have been living life out of Syracuse, after Syracuse. So if you could speak to your college self, what kind of advice would you offer to your fellow students currently studying at SU right now? The advice could be both professional or just personal life in general. What kind of advice would you offer? Anyone want to start?
I'll start.
Yeah?
So one thing that I would definitely tell myself is take advantage of the time, because it's so limited, right? One thing that I definitely focused on when I came to Syracuse was you got to get involved in student organizations. No matter what it is, whatever you're interested in, just jump right in. So I think I did that, but what I didn't do was leave time for myself and really focus on my professional career. So what I mean is really take advantage of taking internships and growing your professional career, because this is a really precious time for students to try different fields and try different careers and get a taste of what it's like to work under a company, business, etc. So definitely take advantage of that time. But I think that for a lot of students here, it's another thing I would say to students is take advantage of the professors and faculty here. Well, that's something I definitely did not realize until my junior year, that I had all these mentors around me just waiting for people to ask them, what's the next best step. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of mentors here on campus, including Huey and Gina, I see here in the audience. But it wasn't too late, but I wish I had started my freshman year, reaching out to people who I connect with, whether it's through interests or identities. So definitely reach out to your professors. They want to talk to you, they want to get to know you, and it's the best way to really advance your professional career, in addition to taking advantage of internships and getting involved on campus and things like that.
Thank you, Ben.
I'm going to piggyback off of that. So how many of you feel like you have a mentor on campus? Okay, so a few, like good hands, but I think everybody needs to raise their hand. So if you haven't done so, go out there and find yourself a mentor. It doesn't have to be faculty or staff. It could be maybe a senior or something like that, but that's something you have to do. How many of you feel like you are mentors? That you have a mentee? Okay, that's good. We need to continue to give back to each other, right? Because it's a cycle. It's a cycle. Like, Maurice mentioned that his mentors are in the room, and that's important. That type of support is important. But in turn, he's going to mentee people, and they're going to come support him, and he's going to come support them as well. So I would say definitely the mentor piece. I also think that it's important for us to get involved in leadership positions on campus, like be a tour guide, be a RA, and things like that, because students need to see us in those roles. Okay, I currently work in student affairs and higher education, and there are not a lot of people in the field who look like us, college administrators, right? And so I think it's important because a lot of my colleagues, they were like, in college, I was a tour guide. I was the president of my sorority. And I was like, dang, I didn't do nothing. When I look back into my time, I feel like I did not do anything. I know that I did. I was definitely a contributing member of this community. But if I could have done it all over again, I would be an RA, because I think it's free housing. Hello, like my dad would have loved that. But also just, those types of roles on campus, people need to see us in. So when they come to visit, they're like, yes, I need to come to Syracuse.
Can I follow up with that? In terms of this importance of mentoring, I could not highlight, overemphasize this. But now the question is, especially for those students who have not really raised their hands, probably you really want to have someone, but you don't really know how. Any advice in terms of how to really identify a mentor? Is there any sort of tip that you want to offer? Victoria, you want to?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a lot of times you'll have interactions with professors, with faculty, and not even realize that they could be a potential mentor. And it's starting to be aware or conscious of those interactions that you have, that you realize that can become something more than just that interaction. So take notice. I mean, it could be as simple as going to class 10 minutes early and you have a conversation with that professor, and that can grow into so much more than just your limited interaction in that class. I think part of the mentorship that I gained was through networks, and I think to go back to the advice is that take advantage of your peers and all the networks that's available here, because you do live in a place where everyone is connected in some way or fashion. You share something in common, that you're in this university together, you're studying here, share similar organizations, share similar classes, whatever it is, there's someone that you know that will know someone that's a good mentor to you. And a lot of those mentors they foster and bloom on their own. It doesn't necessarily have to be, hey, you're my mentor, I think you can give me the best advice. And so let it naturally happen, or even ask your friends what they think, or a professor. to help you identify?
Good. And skill to find a mentor and to identify this, to sort of cultivate this mentor process. It's going to be very significant not only for your study but also for your future professional career as well. Just as Victoria mentioned, this is a cycle, right? You can mentor, you can be advised in the process. You can have a mentor, and in a couple years or simultaneously you can mentor somebody else. So it is a very important professional skill.
I would also add one more thing about mentorship. It needs to be a two-way relationship, right? So I have a lot of younger graduate students who are in the field of fraternity and sorority life, and they're like, oh yeah, Victoria's my mentor. And I'm like, when did we talk about this? When was this a solid relationship? We haven't talked about this, right? So as much as we give back to them, they need to give back to us as well. I think sometimes when you think about mentorship, you think about it in a hierarchy kind of level. It's not about that. It's about what can they teach you, but what can you teach them in turn. And also think about it, do you want a mentor for your professional life, your personal life, your family life, whatever it is. There are so many different parts of us that we need guidance on, so always think about it that way as well.
Something that I learned in my professional life, just out of college, is don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid, because when I was in college, I was always afraid to reach out and ask, like, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Can you look over my resume? Can you, read my cover letter? Can you give me some advice? Don't ever be afraid, because people don't think of it as you're wasting their time. For a long time, I thought of it as I'm afraid I'm going to waste their time, and they have better things to do. But really, people really do want to help you. And now that I'm sort of in a position to help others, I have interns in my office. I always reach out to them. Hey, what do you need to learn? What do you want to learn? I can definitely help you. And it's like Victoria said, it's a two-way relationship. We gain something from helping them as well. So do not be afraid to ask, because people want to help for sure.
You won't know if you don't ask.
Okay, hi. So I echo what the other panelists said in terms of mentorship. I think one thing that I really missed out on was seeking out someone who could give me the academic and professional advice that I really needed. I was a broadcast and digital journalism major in Syracuse, and it's no secret that Newhouse has a pretty severe diversity problem in terms of its faculty and staff. And I remember receiving critiques about how I looked on camera. And more than once, I would have male professors telling me that I needed to put on more eye makeup because my eyes looked too small on camera. Which is a common critique, by the way. That's not even like a groundbreaking thing in Newhouse. But I wish that I had an Asian professor or staff member, someone who had experience in this specific industry, to give me advice on how to deal with that kind of feedback that actually hurt my grades. And I think the problem with my experience was that I actually never even sought out those mentors. I think I kind of gave up. I didn't see them. They weren't my professors, so I didn't look out for them. I didn't do my research about who was actually on that campus, and so that's one thing that I do regret. Another thing is that I wish that I didn't give in to the fear of being rejected from really, really great opportunities. There are awesome opportunities all across campus, and I think I was so intimidated by my peers that I didn't even apply, and that's one thing that I really, really regret. And the second is I wish that I spoke up more. There were so many microaggressions that I had to listen to in classrooms, and I wish I knew how to respond to them in a way that makes the person learn, so that they don't, make anyone else feel that way in the future. And I never really learned how to have those conversations. I quite frankly still don't, and I think that was a really great opportunity for me, especially at Syracuse. So that would be my answer.
Thank you so much, Jane. If I could offer some sort of feedback to that, I was really struck by your comment, your experience. Those male professors' comments about your image, and that's pretty pervasive in the media industry. And I think one of the things I think we can share with current students is that you do not really limit your mentors or do not really limit your resources within your own college or your own school. You can go beyond Newhouse, for example. You can go to Maxwell. You can go to College of Arts and Science. You can have more Asian faculties over there. You can come to my office. I would be more than happy to have a conversation with you with more sociological perspective of how to handle those kind of microaggressions and those racist comments. So I think going back to Ben's comment, like, don't be afraid to ask. You never know who is going to be helpful. And don't feel sort of intimidated if someone rejects you, because professors are so different, just like people are different. Some people are not, some faculties are not as supportive or not as enthusiastic in mentoring students. Some are very, very friendly. Some are very, very eager actually to support students. So I would actually highly recommend everyone be bold, take initiative, and try to reach out and ask. All right, so very good. Any other advice before we move on to the second question, which is about more specific ones? Anybody have heard about bamboo ceiling? Yes? So it's a kind of glass ceiling applied to specifically to Asian American, Asian communities. So I would not reiterate the definitions of bamboo ceiling. It's really about combinations of barriers, individual, organizational, cultural, that impede Asian American basically advancement or their leadership positions. So I'm wondering about the panelists, and you have different kinds of experiences in workplace right now. How have you perceived bamboo ceiling issues in your personal experiences? What you have observed with colleagues and role models. So even if you have not experienced it personally, but what about your colleagues, your role models? What have you done, if anything, to combat those issues related or as a result from bamboo ceiling?
Okay, so I'll start.
Thank you.
So I'm quite new to the working profession, considering that it's only really been 2 years. So in terms of hitting that bamboo ceiling, I might not have gotten there yet, but I do see that it can happen. And I have seen it happen to mentors and to other working professionals, my colleagues. And part of that, the challenge there, so I didn't mention this earlier, so I work in the tech industry. And in case you don't know how the tech industry is, the demographic made up in the tech industry, there's very little female leadership in the tech industry, let alone Asian female leadership in the tech industry. And so when I look at that and I look at where I am, I always question, will I ever break that ceiling to get to the spot where I want to be? Because if there is no representation there, it's very discouraging as a young professional to think that I can get there. And so part of that, part of the challenge there that I've noticed, and part of the obstacle for me to overcome is that understand that I identify as many in many different ways, but I don't let any of those challenges stop me from doing more. I will always take on more challenges. I will always take on more projects. I will always do more so that I'm not limiting myself to what people are giving me, and not limiting my opportunities to what people are telling me to do next. And part of that is challenging the structure, challenging the group of people that you're working with and working around. I think that there is a lot of stereotypes that Asians are very passive, and when it comes to ideas and brainstorming and meeting, especially with management, upper management, we tend to stay quiet. And I challenge that. Don't stay quiet about it. Make sure your voice is heard, and there are many ways to make sure that you stand out from those challenges and from those obstacles.
So challenge those stereotypes. Sharon, you talk about, is one of these very pervasive stereotypes that Asians are passive, they're quiet, they're reserved. And I think that's a very effective strategy. You prove that those stereotypes are wrong. And when the critical mass of people prove they're wrong, those stereotypes can be effectively changed, right? Anything else? Any other strategies?
Yeah, for me, I tend to think of bamboo ceiling issues as results of a lot of, like Sharon said, a lot of stereotypes about passiveness and lack of leadership abilities, which is completely false. But also an issue of representation at the top of whatever company or business or organization or even schools that you're a part of. And for me, I work in the journalism industry, which, of course, it's very white and very male and skews older. So it's very challenging for journalists of color to break through, have extra opportunities to have bylines, in my example, or be on TV or be on the radio. And it's really through cultivating a lot of relationships that we're able to do these things. When I think of bamboo ceiling issues, it's really about changing the structures of the organizations that we're part of or the schools that we're part of. And the idea of having token representation is to me quite offensive, because change needs to really come from the bottom up, and change needs to really happen with structures that have power to change. So, for example, in a company, you might often have a committee that deals with diversity. And diversity in name only, just have a committee with no power to change, actually does no good for the company when it comes to breaking bamboo ceilings or other barriers for people of color or women or LGBT folks and other identities. So really having change at the top of the representation really is, for me, one way to break through bamboo ceiling issues.
Does she want to go next? I feel like we're all skipping.
Do we wait?
I want to make sure she gets time to speak.
Hi. So I haven't read this book personally, but from my limited knowledge of it, one thing that resonated with me about the Wikipedia page that lists all of the different things that this book talks about is the sticky floor. And it's this idea that Asian Americans feel as if there isn't much mobility. And that's actually something that I've been feeling a lot over the past year. And granted, I know that I'm only a year out, and so it's normal for me to be in this entry-level position, but people who came in at the same time as me, who are the same age as me, who have similar job descriptions as me, they'd be doing less, yet they've been promoted already or gotten a raise, and I just feel as if I'm being taken advantage of, because every time I mention my future to my managers, they're very vague. They just say that I'm doing a great job, and it just makes me feel as if all that I'm getting is really just words of affirmation and not really any sort of action to back up those compliments or the reward that they give me. So I still struggle with that, and I also struggle with, as Sharon said, the lack of representation in general at the leadership level. I think that's something that's very real, and especially at a media company, that also affects the content that we produce. And so a lot of the issues that affect us as a community, the reason why it doesn't break those mainstream media cycles is because most likely those companies don't have that kind of representation across the board, and so those stories aren't being written, those videos aren't being produced. So it can be really discouraging. And I'm challenging myself to be more aggressive, to be more outspoken, and to be that person in the room, because it was really easy to be passive straight out of college. So I encourage all of you who are still students, who will be graduating soon and will be at your first job, to speak up from the beginning. Don't be afraid. They hired you for a reason, and if they want to punish you for speaking your mind, for standing up for your community, standing up for yourself, then I'm not sure that that's a company that you would want to be with anyways. So be bold.
I'm going to add one thing as well. So I want to talk to you about my big sister, Judy. How many of you know the show Survivor? Yes, okay. So the very first Survivor that ever aired was filmed in Borneo, and my sister, Judy, was one of the writers for that show. Okay, she wrote all the games and all that kind of stuff, so super proud of her. But right after that, she changed her name to Jude. okay? And I'll tell you why she did it. As a writer, as a producer, the moment they saw Judy, they thought, oh, it's a woman, and maybe she would not get as many opportunities. So she changed her name to Jude. And so that's hard for me, right? Like growing up, I'm like, oh, Judy JJ. I've always called her Judy. But we're at a point right now where her name is Jude. And so how many of you watch Blackish or Fresh Off the Boat? Anybody? Awesome, awesome shows. My sister Jude, as she prefers to be called now, never went to a traditional college like we're in right now. She went to film school instead. And she has busted her butt in the X amount of years that she's been doing this, that she is now directing Fresh Off the Boat and Blackish. And I am incredibly proud of her, because when was the last time you saw an Asian name as a director on primetime TV? Never. I've never seen it, right? But I think what's interesting, you know, at the wedding 2 weeks ago, when I had a chance to hang out with her, she was telling me a few stories that really inspired me, but kind of brought me back to about, like, the fight is not over, right? We still have a lot of work to do. When she shows up at the ABC parking lot to film these shows, there's a specific parking space for directors. She will park there, and staff members will say, excuse me, delivery is over there. Okay? She's also married to a white guy, and you know, when she has her children with her, people ask her, how long have you been taking care of them? So like this kind of stuff still happens, right? Even though in LA, they're super diverse out there. So I think with this bamboo ceiling thing, you know, I have a lot of thoughts about it, because I truly believe I have been lucky enough that in my field and my experience so far, I have actually gotten more opportunities because of my race, because I am a woman, and that's another thing to talk about. But I'm incredibly proud of her, and I think she's been doing this, pushing and breaking this bamboo ceiling, but it hasn't been easy for her. So I think we need to be more gentle with ourselves, with each other, but I think what we need to do is give each other more props. That's something that we're not doing. We're not showing love to each other enough, and we need to do that in order to help each other elevate.
I mean, I have a comment as well. A lot of times people, Asian American people, thinking that what Sharon said, I'm going to do more, I'm going to diversify, I'm going to do everything, and I'm going to raise my hand for every opportunity. And I'm going to say, great, if I'm your boss. But a lot of, with Asian culture comes with, oh, of course if I do all these things, you know, Western culture will recognize, because in the Asian culture, by being quiet and do more, it is typically recognized. In this society, in this Western culture, it doesn't work that way. And I'm going to say, I'm going to promote somebody else, and whenever I have a tough task, I'm going to go to Asian IT person, Asian computer scientists, Asian engineers, Asian newscast journalists, because they're going to do it, and they're not going to give me the looks. So I think there are different things that, yes, I think, you know, early in your career, take that as part of the skills you're learning, right? Because you need to pack your skills so that you have more opportunities. But at the right time, if they don't recognize your skill sets, you need to be able to say, that's you, right? Because you have that power. And I think we continue to say passive, and I have to tell you, I work with a number of Asian engineers and faculty. They're passive, and then they steam. And so many bosses know, it's like, you know, let's just let them steam up. And then they go into that quiet phase again. And then, you know, 3-4 years, they steam back up and they steam. So I think you need to understand our background and how we were raised, and then counter, it's not steam. I have a real issues that I need to address. So I think that's just something that and many Asian parents would say, as you get more educated, you should be more humble, right? That's the word they, you know, at least my mom told me to be, you know, put my head down and be more humble. Well, it doesn't work in this society. If we are working in this society and we are born here, we are, raised here, we're gonna work here. We need to make sure that we follow what is currency of this country.
I think what Gina just mentioned is directly at the heart of bamboo ceiling issues. Bamboo ceiling is about leadership. So what Asian Americans often have at workplace as a barrier is they develop their expertise in a certain subject, in a certain domain. Yes, they're extremely good engineer, they're extremely good programmer. Even in technology sectors, Sharon, you're gonna recognize that a lot of, you have great representation, but that representation really becomes invisible at the top, at the management level, or even higher. So a lot of Asian Americans are perceived as being very good at or proficient in their skill sets, but they're not perceived as the leadership potential. So that, I think, we need to be aware and we need to acknowledge it, because only by understanding it and being aware of it can we really fully change it or start to change it. Now the question is, how can we change it?
So I'm really glad that Gina brought it up, because this is something that I didn't really think about until my manager had actually, and I'm very close with my manager. We have a very open relationship about my work, and just she's almost like my mentor. One of the things that I struggle with right now is I have a hard time to say no to a lot of things. And it's whether or not someone comes to ask me for help or ask me a question, I'm always saying yes. And I think that's just by nature. I think that I generally try to help the best I can, because I feel like if I have the capability of doing so, I'm not going to say no. And so a lot of times what ends up happening is I stretch myself so thin. And one of the things that my manager brought up to me is that you're stretching yourself so thin that when someone needs something or has a question, they know to come to you because they know you won't say no. And that's part of those stereotypes, that they know that I'm that person that won't say no, whether or not it's regarding because of my race, because of my gender, or because just me, right? And so one of the outcomes of that, the advice there was that work hard, but work smart. Work smart in the sense that be conscious of what you say no to and what you say yes to. Be conscious of when you challenge upper management, or be conscious of when you speak up, because there's times when it is appropriate to speak up, and there's times when that might not be the right time.
Thank you very much. And the other thing I want to go back to is still this point of mentoring. I don't know whether some of you have read the book written by Sheryl Sandberg, Ling In. And Ling In is actually talking about the glass ceiling issues that women face in workplace, how women can really advance themselves in the top leadership positions. I think a lot of it Sheryl Sandberg has written about women in general can be applied to Asian Americans. So this lack of mentoring, this perception that they cannot say no, they're passive, this perception that they're not of leadership potential. So one of the things about mentoring I remember Sheryl Sandberg has really advocated is that in a field where you don't really see people like you being the leaders or being the ready mentors, you need to seek out mentors who are not like you. In other words, for example, going back to Jane's field, in her field, unlike technology field, you don't really see a lot of Asian Americans. So if you always look up to Asian Americans, it's very hard for you to really get any support. In other words, I think we have to probably think about broaden our alliance. And just like women, they can get support from men as well. Asian Americans can get support from non-Asian Americans and from other minority groups. I don't really know what you think of that in terms of broaden our mentoring.
Absolutely, I agree. And for my profession, because there are so few Asian American journalists, there are actually affinity groups, like Asian American Journalist Associations with local chapters that work together to deal with these issues. And I think it's really important that you find those groups that can relate to you and can relate to your problems. And again, find that mentor, right? It goes back to mentorship. But absolutely, Dr. Ma, I think you're right. Broaden your horizons when it comes to who you're looking for. Because it doesn't even have to be someone in your field who can help you. For example, when I was a student here, I studied journalism, but Gina was really instrumental to helping me think differently about my career and my time here and how I can really make it the most effective way as I can. So seek mentors from other fields as well.
Does Jane want to say something? Oh, all right, Gina.
So I know everybody was talking about mentor. I think we should also talk about sponsors, right?
Do you want to distinguish the two first? Distinguish the two. Help distinguish the two first.
Sponsors are typically at a higher level and really highest, one of the higher level within the organization, so VP or higher or division heads. And their circle of networks are different than your boss's circle of networks. Okay? And therefore, they could be able to talk about you, drop your name, as they have their meetings. So many of the promotion opportunities may not be announced. It's already decided. It seems like it's all over the network, right? But a lot of times that's the discussions that are happening at that sponsor level. And you need to have a right sponsor that who would drop your name and your account at the right place at the right time. Because of that's the circle you wanted to be in. And that's different than mentor level. And many of the big corporations, those are the, let's say, university. I know Syracuse University trustees are meeting with some of the students. They have a relationship with a one-on-one relationship with the graduates. That's their sponsor. Your name will be dropped at the trustee level, right? And that's the visibility you want. So it's not just the mentors. You need to have a right sponsor who's going to drop your name at their circles. And opportunity will rise with those type of people dropping your names.
So if I may add something as advice for the students, oftentimes I might share like that there's an alum on campus, you should go see that person speak, and many times students are like, oh, I don't have time for that, I don't want to do that. But that's exactly what Gina's talking about. It's like taking advantage of that opportunity. If someone's here on campus, you go talk to that person and make that connection and let them know who you are.
Yes, please.
So I think I'm a person in civil environment region. So I will support Gina's idea, but I just organized a conference at the National Science Foundation. So I want to expand on sponsor. So I think definitely you need a sponsor who's much higher level, but you can have sponsor at lower level. Because to reach out to a president or vice president, that doesn't happen very easily. Somebody who is a senior to you, and even as a colleague, many times what happens in meetings when ideas come forward, it happens that women and Asian Americans don't support those ideas. So they don't use specific names that, ideas presented by Sharon. And so these are small things which we can change in our conversation and meetings, and in a way that it raises to your level. So you sponsor, you look for it, but your sponsor can be just a few years above you. You don't have to be vice president or this.
Can I also have one more comment
Of
about
course.
this issue?
Please.
For the students in the room, I would recommend, whatever you're studying, don't just stick to that. If you have an opportunity to take a course in something like Asian/Asian American Studies that really does focus on leadership, take advantage of those opportunities because you may learn technical skills or theory through your coursework, but ultimately, when employers want to test your leadership ability, whatever that means, you can say I've taken courses or I have some knowledge in leadership through my studies, in Asian American studies or sociology or other kind of non-technical fields that really teach you things like critical thinking, which may not be tangible, but are really important when it comes to dealing with real-world issues, like when you're out in the workplace and you don't know how to advance in your career or things like that. Critical thinking is really important, and I really advise students to take advantage of, again, things like Asian American Studies. I don't mean to plug it too many times. But
Well, thank you,
We
Ben.
are plugging it.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah. I also want to add to that too. So I took African American Studies here, right? And my dad was like, "What the hell are you gonna do with that?" And I will say that it is a very interesting conversation starter. When people do look at my resume, they're always intrigued to know. But I'd love to share a story about when I was on tour with Jackie Chan. So he was my first boss out of college. And so I had a really, really cool job. And we were in Shanghai, I forget what we were working on, and he was working on a China version of like Jackie Chan Adventures. He was recreating some kind of a cartoon. So, we were hanging out in the room and we're flipping through all the different characters that are going to be featured in this cartoon, and all of a sudden I see a black character, okay? In this photo, this character has big lips, is wearing basketball clothes, and just kind of crazy, right? And so that's when I really got to apply my African American Studies content and knowledge to be like, yo, Jackie, that's not cool. He was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, this is what it means in America, and this is what people would look at you with if you decided to go through with this kind of character. And for you to work so closely with Chris Tucker and Will Smith, like, that would be completely disrespectful. And he was like, okay, tell me more. I was like, okay, if Will Smith did a cartoon in America and the only Asian character in that cartoon was wearing a rice hat, would you be offended? He was like, oh yeah, I didn't think about it that way. So, I think like this generation of students, like we use the word woke, right? But what does it mean to be socially conscious when you get into your workplace, regardless of what you decide to do? I feel very privileged working in student affairs because we talk about that every single day. We talk about social justice. What does it mean to make sure everybody is included and things like that? But in other fields, that's not necessarily the case, right? So I think it's going to raise your level of consciousness, and that's why being involved with this, just being here, being able to take different courses on campus, getting outside of your comfort zone is going to help you tremendously afterwards.
And to piggyback off of what Victoria said and also Gina said earlier during lunch, your major will get you the career, but whatever else you do outside of that, so if you do a minor in humanities or social science or whatever it is, AAA, for example, we're going to plug it again, that's what distinguishes you. That's what makes you unique and special outside of your peers that are going for that same position. Because, like for Victoria, African American Studies on her resume, wow, it's different than what your competitors in that field are doing. And so do something that challenges what the norm or stereotype is, because there's so many opportunities out there. And your journey is unique and special to your own path. And you don't have to follow someone else's journey in order to be successful.
And it is important that it's part of your resume. It is actually more important that you do have those kinds of, reading, knowledge, and discussion in African American Studies, in Asian American Studies, and you actually talk about bamboo ceiling issues in the classroom before you even step into the workplace. I think it's going to be tremendously helpful for you to be really experiencing bamboo ceiling in the workplace. You are much more prepared. You are able to articulate those concepts and aware of those kinds of barriers. And I'm pretty sure that leadership is a very blurry and fuzzy concept. And with those kinds of knowledge, you're going to be much more equipped to present yourself to combat those kinds of bamboo ceiling issues. All right, so I think we're probably cool with this question, and let's move on. And our third question is about the name, our name. And we're all very much aware that a foreign name, my name, Ying Yi Ma, you cannot imagine how how much trouble I've got during even the customer service call, how to pronounce your name. And the foreign sounding name is certainly, research shows that it's going to be giving you some disadvantage. It's biased in your job hunting or in your workplace. And I am wondering about how you really deal with that in your workplace. Manage those kinds of bias about the foreign sounding name.
I guess I've never really dealt with that issue because Benjamin is a pretty white name, I guess. But something that I have.
What about your last name?
My last name, that's true too.
Right.
Fang. I mean, people think like tooth, right? But something that I have dealt with is not the name necessarily, but my physical look. In being a reporter, oftentimes I don't get taken seriously as my white counterparts. I'll give an example. Out in Queens, where I do a lot of reporting, we have all sorts of media. We have like weekly papers, we have daily papers, we have ethnic media, which is like Chinese, Korean, Bengali, Indian press. And a lot of times I get mistaken for a Chinese reporter, speaking. So a lot of times people won't think that I report for an English-speaking audience. And that really affects, I think, me because I think the Chinese press and the Asian press, or ethnic press in general, they're not really taken seriously by a lot of subjects, that people we interview, elected officials, people with authority who, really do need to answer our questions, and when we write stories, like we need to hold them accountable. When they look at me, they might not even take me as seriously, right? Or when I start speaking, they're like, "Whoa, like you speak, English," like everyone has probably experienced at some point. So the way you look, it can also hinder you in some aspect. This concept of foreigner, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not from this country, even though I was born and raised in New York City. Right?
So I think Victoria and Jane both gave examples of that actually earlier before we even came onto this. One about her big sis Judy/Jude now, and Jane about the feedback she got about her facial features. And I don't know, have you guys seen the article where a man was responding to a customer or a client from a colleague's email, and the colleague's email, he didn't realize that the colleague's email signature was in the email when he was responding back, and so the client response back was very negative and very a lot of bad connotations and looked down upon the employee. And he didn't realize that until he did the social experiment with his colleague. And what they did was, for a week, they switched their names in their email. So at the end of their emails to their client, they would sign with their colleague's name. And from that, that's how he saw the challenges of being a female in that industry. And it was very interesting and very, I think it was a great way to show people that there are these challenges, not just with race. It's happening with gender, with other identities across all industries, where we see these barriers are causing us to lose extra opportunities or not get the same opportunities as our peers. And I personally believe that in terms of that foreign name, I don't think you should ever need to change your identity, including how your name is spelled or pronounced, in order to get an opportunity. Like Jane said earlier, if you had to challenge your values and challenge who you are, then the opportunity maybe wasn't right for you. And I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and if that opportunity closed on you, that just means that it was opening up another door for you. And I feel like in college we get the concept that, oh, we're chasing after this opportunity, we have to get it. But even if we don't, that doesn't mean it's the end of the journey. It doesn't mean the end of the world, because I do believe that if I didn't get that, something else further down the line was in store even better for me.
So how many of you know how Jackie Chan got his English name? So his Chinese name is Chen Gong Sang, and that literally means born in Hong Kong Chan. Okay, not very creative. But when he was working in the industry, starting out as a stuntman, he would work in construction in order to, do his little side hustle, or rather. And his colleagues in construction started calling him Jack, just because they didn't know how to say his Chinese name, right? And then they kept calling him that, and then somehow it evolved to Jackie, and so that's how we have Jackie Chan. But what's interesting about him and watching him evolve is that in the past, he felt like he had to fit into the Western world. I don't know if you all know this, but he has done the double eyelid surgery, okay? If you take a look at his old school movies versus now, you can see the wrinkles in his eyes. He's done that in order to fit into what we think is beautiful here in the West, right? But what I have seen him do in terms of evolution is, if you look at the press releases and all the different conferences, press conferences he went to during Rush Hour 1, he was wearing Western suits. Okay, and when we saw him receive the honorary Oscar award just a few months ago, he was wearing a Chinese suit. So he has evolved tremendously in his identity as a Chinese man and what it means to be a global superstar. He is so comfortable in who he is right now that nobody else matters. But it took a long time to get there, right? Like, we're talking double eyelid surgery. That's a lot. That hurts, And so that's something that I had to tell him when I saw him a few months ago, and I was like, I don't know if you understand this, but for me as a Chinese American kid, to see you go up there and to receive this award wearing something Chinese, and I think in his acceptance speech, he said something about how he was proud to be Chinese, right? And we're not seeing that often in the media, and that's really, really inspiring. So, once again, the foreign sounding names, I completely agree with Sharon, like, keep your name. That is who you are, that is who you are going to be, and people will adjust in order to make sure that you are okay. There's this book that The Alchemist that always says that when you put your intentions into the universe will yield to you and give you exactly what you want. So we are not going to change ourselves for other people. People are going to change themselves for us, okay? And we need to operate in that kind of mentality because we are worth it. We are worth it.
I think the challenging thing, I'm sorry, just really quickly, the challenging thing about that is, while I absolutely agree.
Sorry. Hi. I really like all the points that you have communicated to me about what people have said so far. I don't have a foreign sounding first name, so it's hard for me to speak to this completely. But I agree with Sharon. I don't think that your name is something that you should change. Oh, I'm sorry, you said wait a second. Am I good now?
Okay, so I'll continue.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so as I was saying, I don't have a foreign sounding first name. I actually get mad at my parents because they didn't really give me a Korean name. They gave me a Korean name that sounded like my English name, and so that's still something that I complain about because I would love to have an authentic Korean name. That's a tangent. I think one interesting thing is that a lot of my coworkers have actually asked if Jane is a cover-up for an Asian-sounding name, and I have to explain that to them. And it's frustrating that that's even a conversation that has to happen. Even if it was a different name, even if it was my middle name, why is that an important question for you to ask? That's always been my frustration, and I think. Sorry, I'm scrolling up to see what else people have talked about. Another challenge that I found is also being an Asian female in the room. So there was actually the most recent example that I can come up with is when I was sitting in a meeting with various writers and editors at our company, and one of my coworkers was talking about how whitewashing isn't really a thing, and how he doesn't believe in cultural appropriation. And thankfully, I was in a room where a lot of people, just kind of perked their heads and they were like, really? You just said that? And it felt really good to not have to be the only person to be outraged in that moment. But there have been many times where I was the only person in that room. Another example is we actually had some sort of a friend of the company who worked on the Great Wall. And so our company was actually exploring doing a branded project with them. And me, being one of the very, very few Asians that actually works with the company, felt extremely uncomfortable with it. They were asking me to produce the piece, and they didn't even see how there was an issue in asking me that and how I might be uncomfortable with it. And it took a few days, but finally I was like, no, I just can't. It makes me really uncomfortable. I don't think that we should be doing this. And so they pulled out. and we even lost money, but I was able to convince them and see the importance of how something like that, we should be paying attention to it. Kind of went on a tangent there, and I think I'm answering the fourth question more than the third, but that's been my experience so far, and I think, again, this really speaks to the overall theme of just being bold in the workplace, standing up for yourself, and even though I was really nervous in that moment, to be one of the very few Asians to be like, you know what, listen, this isn't okay, it worked out in my favor, and I think it worked out in the company's favor, and they saw that, so really grateful for that experience.
All right, thank you very much, Jane. I guess let's come to our final question. That any discussion about Asian American community and inequality issues, you cannot mention, or you cannot avoid mentioning model minority, right? So this is our last question of model minority. So I'm wondering, how have you been really impacted by the model minority myth? And we all know that model minority is a myth, but it's a very viable myth. How are you impacted by it? So what is your advice in confronting it or combating it? Jane, do you want to start?
Kiwi's like, I'm still typing.
I think it's hurting.
Oh, okay. That's okay. We can. I just want to make sure that she has a.
I think she can.
Just want.
Hi! Okay, so you want me to answer the question first? Okay, great. Sorry, thank you so much for the hand signals and for being patient with me. So, I'm sorry, I'm pulling up my questions. I'm a little frazzled right now. So model minority myth. Again, I feel like I answered this a little bit more in the previous question, but there have been many instances in which we've had stories pitched about the model minority myth, and they've been shot down because people say, well, look at the statistics, look at how well Asian and Asian Americans are thriving in the United States. And I always have to pull up certain articles that actually speak to how there are several Asian and Asian American communities that are struggling. Actually, a really common misconception about undocumented immigrants is that most of them come from Asia, and that's actually something that a lot of people don't know, because again, when you think undocumented immigrants, you think about what our politicians and what mainstream media has told you about what to picture when you see an undocumented immigrant. They say they're all coming from Mexico, and that's why we need to create these barriers, these walls. But this is actually something that affects our Asian brothers and sisters. So I think always having to fight against that narrative of Asians are doing completely fine. The only thing that you have to worry about is Hollywood representation, which isn't a big thing. I've always gone against that because I think it's actually a huge issue, because it speaks to how we're compartmentalized into the other category. One of the things that I'm really proud of in my 1 year at Attention, which is the company I work for, is that I interviewed the director, John Chu, who is now in production for the first studio movie with an all-Asian cast. So Crazy Rich Asians will be in theaters next year, and I got to sit down with him and talk to him about whitewashing and his experience in terms of being in the boardroom to make these really big decisions. And he also has the same struggles that we've talked about today, about having to be the person to stand up in the room for really big decisions that affect the overall art that's put out there for people to consume. And one thing that we talked about was how these stories, these Asian stories that are so often replaced with white narratives, it communicates the message that our stories aren't as important, that our faces aren't as important, and that the only thing that Asians can really be are foreign to the United States, because how often have we seen characters with typical Asian accents? That's why people find it so hard to believe that English is my first language. So when I was in Syracuse, that's one of the most common questions that I received was, why are you so good at English? And it's because all you've ever seen are characters who don't know how to speak English that look like me. So that is something that I think really correlates with how we're perceived by society. My biggest hope is that in the future, especially as I continue my development professionally, is that I can only become louder, and I think that's something that all of us strive to be. It's a lot easier said than done. And I hope that we continue to question our answers and to seek out different kinds of answers to our questions, and to seek out a lot of people who can help us find the answers that we're looking for.
Thank you so much, Jane. And I think what she's really speaking to is this visibility, right? And one of the things you can really discuss about the roots of model minority myth, but how can we really get rid of or change model minority myth is really, I think, highly dependent on the media. And if, as Jane has been talking about, if media can do more, or if media can be transformed to change the image of Asian Americans in the United States, model minority myth will be losing its popularity. And I want to pass on to other panelists to see how you would think. What is your advice in sort of confronting it and combating it?
Well, as a member of the media, that's absolutely true, and I think representation is definitely something that is pervasive, because that's important, because when you don't have, like Jane was talking about, someone in the room who understands what the model minority is, and you have producers and writers and directors who have this notion of Asian Americans as a studious, hardworking, passive person with no problems and high income. When you have all these ideas in your mind about Asian Americans, then you're not going to think about them in a holistic way. But the reality is that Asian Americans is a really diverse group. When you talk about Asian Americans, you talk about like 50-something countries, and you're talking about people with unique struggles. I mean, East Asian Americans have different problems than Southeast Asian Americans, with different problems with South Asian communities. Within New York City itself, people think Asian Americans make a lot of money, and if reporters are looking at national data that shows that households are making more than their white counterparts. But if you take into consideration the number of people who earn money in the family, then it's actually less per earner.
Per capita.
Per capita,
yeah.
Exactly. In New York City, where I'm from, Asian Americans are actually the racial group with the highest amount of poverty, 27%. But people don't know that, right? Because they don't look at the picture, the whole picture. And something that can really actually solve that, going back to the answer of solutions, is something called disaggregation. It's this concept that when you're looking at one racial group, Asian Americans as a whole, you only get just that flat picture. But when you break down, disaggregate all the individual communities with their educational attainment, with their incomes, with all of these different data, then you can actually get a fuller picture of the different struggles that Asian Americans go through. And again, different communities go through different things, right? As an East Asian American, I have never been racially profiled. I've never been stopped at an airport. But I'm sure that South Asian Americans cannot say the same thing because of the different things that they face based on their appearance, based on stereotypes, names, all sorts of factors. So disaggregation is really important and something that maybe we can look into further.
Thank you, Ben.
I would say that it starts with education. So when I first moved down to Georgia, I was working as a fraternity sorority advisor. And I remember one of the young ladies that I was working with, she's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, which is the first black sorority that was founded in 1908. So she started asking me a few things, and she's like, you know what, you're not even Greek. That's what she said to me. And anybody who knows me knows that I am a very proud member of my sorority, right? And I'm here for the fraternal movement. And so I could have been super immature about it, right? But I decided that it was a learning moment. It was an educational moment where I said, well, actually, my sorority is not as big as yours. It's not as famous, doesn't have as many celebrities, but it does exist. right? And this is where we were founded. And actually, the first Chinese fraternity was founded in the early 1900s at Cornell. So I gave her a lesson right there, and I was nice about it, right? Because I'm from New York, and I'm usually pretty rude. So I wanted to make sure it was a good learning moment. But it was in that very moment where she was able to understand a little bit more. For the students that I worked with, it was West Georgia, closer to Alabama. I remember one kid came up to me, he was like, "Girl, I like him foreign." That's what he said to me. I'm like, okay, first of all, get out of my face. Okay, second of all, I'm not foreign, I'm from New York. And he said, that's still foreign to me. And so what I learned is that student has never left the state of Georgia and has not had many interactions with Asians or Asian Americans. And that was also a learning moment for him too. And that's when I realized that I was blessed that I've been able to travel to so many different places where that's not whatever is foreign. You know what's foreign to me? Like aliens. But aliens aren't even foreign anymore. Like there's such a big part of like what we talk about and TV shows. You know what I mean? So I think it's about the learning moments, the key learning moments, and how we are educating each other and how we can educate each other on behalf of each other too. So my husband, he is not an Asian man, right? But he knows so much about it. He is able to advocate on my behalf, and vice versa. Right? When I feel like there is something's not going well in the African American community, I will speak up and I will say things. And so, do we know each other well enough that we can advocate for each other too? So it starts with education for the myth. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I've heard media perspective, I've heard industry perspective, I've heard education perspective. I think if I can piggyback on your point, Victoria, I think to some extent, to combat model minority myth probably requires us to be less sensitive. Sort of a lot of people holding that myth, probably not because they're against us or they're fundamentally hostile to us. It is largely because they're ignorant or they don't really know about us. So I think treating this as an educational opportunity, as an educational moment, is actually a very good strategy to approach this. Yeah. Of course, yeah. I think that's it for our panel, but I'd like to open the floor up for any kind of question from you. I think we have time for 2 questions. Yes? Yes, there's one. Joy, right?
Yeah. So how would you advise us on dealing with microaggressions that we could face in class, for example? And how, in what way, I know we should reply civility, but how do we go about it?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think Jane has mentioned very briefly, speak out. Treat this as an educational moment. Not take it too personally, but definitely feel like this is your obligation to educate others. And that actually help you go beyond your personal sort of hurt or feelings, that this is actually something good for all of us. Anybody else on the panel?
Yeah, I'm sure all of us deal with it every day, and there's no perfect solution in my opinion, but something that I've kind of really learned in how to deal with it is I used to be really just super angry about it, right? Start yelling or you're ignorant, whatever. But oftentimes that message doesn't get through to the person if they just